Hong Kong.
For decades, it's been that ultimate cosmopolitan crossroads where global finance met Asian energy. But right now, well, the city is quietly going through this really rapid, profound demographic change. It's more than just people leaving. It's a fundamental shift in who calls Hong Kong home, and it seems to be reshaping its identity almost overnight.
And that transformation is exactly what we're diving into today. Our sources really detail a structural shift in Hong Kong's expat landscape. So our job here is to analyze the mechanics of that change. We're looking for three key things, really. The specific political and health drivers that push the non-Chinese departure faster,
Yeah.
then who's arriving to fill that space, and finally, the real tangible impact this is having, on-the-ground businesses, property, the city's whole vibe. We want to get beyond just the headlines here.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with why people left so quickly. I mean, Hong Kong always has a high turnover of professionals, right? But this recent wave, especially Western and other non-Chinese expats, it felt much faster than usual. What were the specific things pushing people out so strongly?
Yeah, it really felt like a classic pincer movement, hitting professionals from two sides: strategic uncertainty and, frankly, logistical nightmares. The first pressure point was political uncertainty. We're talking about several years of social unrest, which then culminated in the national security law being imposed. For international businesses, for high net worth folks, that created a sort of palpable chill. Concerns about data security, the legal framework they were used to.
Okay, so that's the big picture, the sort of structural, longer-term worry. But what about the immediate trigger? For just the average professional family, say, what was the final straw?
That was definitely the response to the global health crisis. Exactly. The sheer stringency of the COVID-19 measures became the immediate tipping point for so many. I mean, imagine you're an executive. Your job needs international travel. Suddenly you're facing mandatory, non-negotiable hotel quarantine stays, sometimes 14, even 21 days every single time you came back. Plus, the isolation rules if you happen to test positive.
Wow. That just makes doing global business almost impossible, doesn't it? It completely changes the maths on whether it makes sense to be based there.
It really did. The sources are pretty clear on this. The disruption to personal life, to travel, to business continuity,
Yeah.
it just became too much for many. Professionals and families who relied on that global connection suddenly found Hong Kong had sort of, closed itself off. And that was in really sharp contrast to other hubs in the region.
Right, and when you look at that comparison, you immediately see why places like Singapore popped up as the alternative, right? What was Singapore offering that Hong Kong, well, deliberately wasn't at that point?
Predictability, mostly, and certainty. Singapore's policies, okay, they were strict sometimes too, but they generally offered a clearer path for international travel and movement. That made it way more appealing for multinational companies and their staff. And don't underestimate the emotional drivers either. People wanting to see family overseas without risking these long, unpredictable quarantines that eventually just outweigh the benefits of staying for many.
So it sounds like the decision to leave for a lot of people wasn't necessarily about rejecting Hong Kong's economic potential itself. It was more about rejecting the unpredictable lifestyle that came with the governance during those specific years.
I think that's a really crucial distinction to make, yes. It was largely driven by logistics, by family needs, when the sheer inconvenience just hit a critical point.
Okay, now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Despite all those high-profile departures, Hong Kong is still seen as a land of opportunity, right? So, the tide of Western expats might have gone out, but another tide is definitely coming in. Who stuck around? And maybe more importantly, who's filling that pretty significant professional gap?
Well, first, we need to be nuanced about who stayed. There's a pretty significant group of Asian expats, maybe from places like Korea, Japan, India, who are still very drawn to the city. For them, maybe the main draw isn't the connection to the West, but Hong Kong's absolutely vital role as the key gateway to mainland China. That hasn't changed.
But the really big structural shift, the one that's fundamentally changing that cosmopolitan label, that's the pivot north, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's the main story. Mainland Chinese nationals are increasingly stepping into those professional and leadership roles left by the non-Chinese expats. And look, this isn't just happening organically. It's actively encouraged, facilitated by various talent acquisition schemes. These are designed specifically to bring highly skilled mainland workers into the city.
Tell me more about these talent schemes. What are they exactly? That sounds like something, an investor or maybe a professional thinking of moving there needs to grasp.
Yeah, the main one to know is the Top Talent Pass Scheme, or TTPS. It was set up to attract high earners or graduates from the world's top universities, basically offering them a fast track to residency. It really signals a strategic direction from the Hong Kong government, strengthening that integration with the mainland by specifically bringing in talent that can bridge the international and mainland markets.
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture, like you said, this isn't just about filling jobs, it's really about cultural adaptation, maybe even linguistic adaptation, right? If your business wants to do well in Hong Kong now, you have to realize your colleagues, maybe your main customers, they operate with a different set of expectations.
Precisely. And the sources really bear this out. Businesses are pivoting, and fast. That means everything from embracing Chinese payment methods, Alipay, WeChat Pay, are absolutely essential now for this incoming group to actively marketing on mainland social media platforms like Xiaohongshu or Weibo. There's also a noticeable shift in the professional world towards Mandarin becoming more common, maybe even preferred in some contexts, alongside using simplified Chinese characters in business documents. So the very definition of cosmopolitan in Hong Kong is shifting. Maybe less East meets West and more Hong Kong meets the Greater Bay Area.
Okay, let's move to that third section, the tangible impacts. We've talked high-level shifts, but what strikes you as the most visible changes on the ground? Like, if you were walking around Central or maybe Long Kwai Fong today, what signs of this massive demographic shift would jump out?
Well, the effects are probably most visible in the consumer and leisure sectors. Businesses that really relied, almost exclusively, on that traditional non-Chinese expat crowd.
Yeah.
Think about certain types of bars, maybe specific international food places, niche services. They face some really acute challenges. We've definitely seen quite a few close down or at least scale back significantly because, well, their core customer base kind of vanished almost overnight.
Yeah, that makes sense. If your whole model was geared towards a specific international scene and that scene largely relocates, you're going to struggle.
Exactly. But, this is Hong Kong. Dynamism is kind of its default mode. So alongside those closures, you absolutely see the adaptation story playing out. Successful businesses are showing that agility, they're rebranding, changing menus, optimizing their whole customer experience to attract the growing mainland Chinese demographic. This could mean anything from staff training on different service preferences to making sure those digital payments are totally seamless.
What about housing? That's always the big one in Hong Kong, the barometer of population shifts. The sources mentioned something interesting about expat renters, didn't they?
Yes, they did. There was a very clear, noticeable drop in renters from that traditional expat group, particularly in areas they historically favored, mid-level, south side maybe. But, and this is where digging into the data is important, while that group left, overall rental rates didn't just crash across the board. It shows how complex the property market there is.
Huh. Why not? You'd think losing a big chunk of typically high-paying renters would really soften prices.
Well, because the inflow of mainland Chinese professionals, especially the well-paid ones, coming through things like the TTPS, has been really strong and continuous. That's stabilized demand, particularly at the higher end of the rental market. Plus, you always have Hong Kong's fundamental supply constraint, right? Limited land keeps baseline pressure high. So while maybe some specific types of apartments tailored for old-style expat packages might have seen rents dip, the overall market kind of absorbed the shock because the incoming mainland demand was so robust. It's more a transition in who is renting, not necessarily a collapse in overall demand.
So it's a picture of contrast then. Some sectors, maybe those tied to the old social scene, are really struggling, but the property market shows the sheer economic force of this new incoming group. Adaptation isn't just nice to have, it's basically essential for survival if you're operating in Hong Kong today. You really have to serve the city as it is now, not as it was 5 years ago.
And this raises that really important question, especially for you, our listener. If you're tracking Asia's economic hubs, maybe thinking about investment or even relocating professionally, what does this fundamental transformation actually mean for your strategy?
Yeah, what does it mean? I think it means we have to fundamentally recalibrate how we see Hong Kong on the world stage. It's clearly transforming from that traditional, maybe Western-leaning expat hub into a major city that's increasingly defined by its seamless integration with mainland China economically, demographically, culturally. The idea of treating Hong Kong as just a sort of convenient English-speaking base for Western companies, those days seem to be over.
I agree. The key takeaway, I think, for anyone involved, investors, professionals, has to be recognizing that success in this new Hong Kong hinges on understanding and catering to the priorities, the preferences of the incoming demographic. That means the mainland market and the professionals who are strengthening those ties. This is a fundamental shift in the market structure. It demands a strategic pivot. So what does this all mean? It means the playbook for succeeding in Hong Kong has been rewritten. Mainland connectivity, cultural fluency, these are now paramount.
This whole situation really highlights the incredible speed at which global talent pools and business focus can shift when government policies, especially stringent ones, clash with the needs of international business and maybe personal freedom. The rapid, quite deliberate shift we've seen from Western expats towards mainland professionals in Hong Kong, it shows that major global cities really have to constantly adapt their social, their economic structures if they want to keep that status as essential global hubs.
It's a truly fascinating case study. And the way Hong Kong's identity, its cosmopolitan fabric, has pivoted so quickly. It makes you wonder how resilient other global financial centers would be if they faced similar kinds of policy-driven demographic shocks. It's definitely a trend that professionals everywhere probably need to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. So if this deep dive into Hong Kong's evolving dynamics has sparked more questions for you, perhaps, about moving, investing, or just understanding dynamic regions like this, especially how to navigate these changing markets, we do encourage you to explore more tailored insights. Just head over to moveandstay.com/request to learn more. That's moveandstay.com/SO request. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.